welcome to the stage our chair, Paul Evans, with his panel, who he will introduce himself. We're about to find out what the opportunities are to develop the industry from some of the biggest global leads in our industry. So give them a very warm welcome. Thank you.
Come on, Gayle. Fucking hell. There's always one. Bless. So, hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here again. So, did any of you, most of you, catch Nick Manning's session just before the break? I thought it was kind of a nice segue into this one. So, from the business of media, and I think, you know, looking at some of the sessions earlier, this is a great opportunity to have that advertiser perspective. And as Nick kind of mentioned, you know, there's multiple ways now that the media industry is being funded, but advertisers still represent over $600 billion, 30 billion pounds, I think, in the UK in terms of advertising spend overall. So we're a key stakeholder within the industry. And, you know, we need to be heard, basically, as advertisers and marketers. So with that in mind, I have an incredible panel of individuals, no pressure guys, representing different parts of the industry, which is pretty awesome. So I have Beatrice from JDEPeet. There's a parent company in there from Europe that I won't even get into. Lisa from Vodafone. I'm ex-Vodafone as well, so we know each other quite a little bit.
We do.
Alex from formerly Tesco and Sky, but now Kraft Heinz, right? Mm-hmm. And right. Gayle, bless, who gets the massive sympathy vote. She can say anything she likes, and it's all cool, from L'Oreal UK. So really, like, years of experience in terms of client-side media function leadership on the stage. So hopefully we'll have some time. I'll shut up at some point, and hopefully we'll have some time for some questions at the end as well. And you guys should kind of just pile in. So let's kick off with kind of thinking about future of media as a kind of event title, right? And Media 3.0, whatever that means. What is the North Star for you guys in terms of media industry and media as a function, as part of the marketing capability? Where are you guys looking to take it? What are the kind of big things, the big rocks that you're aiming to change and transform within the industry? Like, you go, B.
So I'll kick it off. So I've been part of the WFA for a very long time, or Federation of Advertisers, and we actually released last year an updated global media charter. If you haven't read it, go and download it. That's a plug for it. But we identified 5 different areas of focus for us as an industry. It's probably familiar focus. It's around measurement, transparency and duality. It's about plans and sustainability. It's about societal impact, and it's also about actually talent and agencies and partnerships, etc. But I was thinking, when I saw the title of this, what kind of brings it together for me from a consumer perspective is the North Star that it's not about me, it's for me. And why I say that is we have been mining a lot about being able to target, hyper-targeting. Paul, did you know that you got your coffee last week and now I know that I can target you again? That's not necessarily what consumers want. However, consumers are expecting that things are for them, that we do know that there's not a disruption, that there's nothing that's wrong in terms of communication around it. And I think that these 5 areas that we kind of identified around the WFA work that we did, that is kind of brought into that statement, which means that we're going to see a North Star bringing context and content much closer together, and it's going to be about, you know, for the consumer, not just about the consumer.
It's not a bad place to start, is it, in terms of like putting the consumer first? What about you, Lisa?
I think media is what media always has been. It's always been, I guess, part art, part science. And I think just the only evolution over time has been the platforms and the tools, the media owners we work with. But the essential principle of absolutely working in service of consumers, but doing so through the most creative means that you can in order to drive attention and consideration for your brand, for your product, for your business is what we have always done and what we will always do. So I think it's just about trying to always remember that, we are marketeers, media is a tool for, marketing to consumers, and that has to be done in the way that is most effective, which will always be about creativity, as well as then using the tools that you have to be as accurate and effective as you can be in where your advertising lands.
Yeah, I like that in terms of with all the change going on around us, there's always the fundamentals of advertising, communication, marketing that we kind of got to think about as well. Alex?
I think Media 3.0 sounds quite grandiose as a title, right? But there's a few things that we're talking about more this time this year than we were this time last year. I think the first of those is transparency. And transparency in media has always been, a focus point of conversation. But I think what we're starting to see more and more so is that as consumer attention fragments, as the supply chain fragments, it's increasingly challenging to know exactly where your ads are showing up for good reasons, but that's something we're thinking more and more about. I think the second thing is what I'd sort of encapsulate as the quest for attention. I think obviously high attention, high impact media is at the core of what we're all in the business of, right, in driving effective results. I think it's becoming increasingly hard to capture that. I think for two reasons. First of all, the diversification of the media landscape that I mentioned earlier. But I think also the shortening of, consumer attention spans as well. As we move into the TikTok generation, capturing someone's attention for a long period of time, it's harder to do, which is why I think the creativity of media comes in and plays a larger part as well. So I think that's the second thing. I think the third thing is, and this is very much rightly so, I'm very pleased about this, is we're starting to take the conversation about sustainability and the industry much more seriously. So that's something we're thinking and talking a lot more about at Kraft, Heinz, but also I think as an industry group, and I think that's brilliant. So that they're the things that we're thinking more about than we were previously.
Good. Love sustainability as well as a mission for everybody to kind of lean in on. Gayle?
Well, as a business, L'Oréal sees media as fuel for growth. So it's very much about investing rather than spending. And so where we're looking to go is very much about modern, effective, responsible investment and making sure that it's data-driven as well. So making sure that we're responsible in terms of consumer data, in terms of carbon load, making sure we're in terms of how we're investing and where we're investing our money, but equally understanding the business results as well. So, we have had good business success and we have seen our media investment grow on the back of it.
Yep.
So it's very much fuel for growth.
So we've all touched upon a little bit about kind of why and kind of what we're aiming for. So maybe Gayle, just talk to the how, so your function, the talent in-house and the partnerships that you have. How are you leveraging those capabilities then to kind of bring about the change in media function or media discipline?
I mean, we've seen significant change in our media function and stakeholders, I would say, pretty much since COVID. So obviously, since we've accelerated on e-commerce, those lines have kind of blurred between marketing and commercial teams. So you've got more and more people touching media, if you like, and that above the line, below the line has basically disappeared. And so the skill sets being developed across the company are really varied. So whether it is things like boosting advocacy, so being more agile on social media, whether it is retail media, all the different new touch points that are coming, e-commerce skill sets, those are being developed. We've had an in-house programmatic team, I think since 2019.
Yeah.
So we've had it quite a long time. And that is some of the skill sets that we're starting to develop now in-house, is that agility social and how do we respond to the business. But equally, we are upskilling across the company, across everybody. And it's no longer just a few marketeers, it's now a lot of people.
Bea, you're in a global role, right?
I'm in a global role, yes I am.
So how's it changed for you, that dimension, or what's your media function look like?
So I think, of course, if we look back 10, 15 years, etc., it's always been a kind of a drive for global advertisers to consolidation, efficiency, effectiveness, etc. That's quite important still. I mean, especially if you have 40, 45 markets like I do, or even 100 markets. So that element is still there. And I think that element, if we start looking at a macroeconomic situation that we're in, we're in a, what would people arguably say, moving into recession, are we in a recession, it's a inflationary period, etc. So that focus remains very critical. But what I think is interesting is, I'll go back to the consumer point, how media is consumed, what are the consumer trends and insights, etc., are different across the world. So you can't do everything globally necessarily that you could previously do. If you go to a market like the Netherlands, where I'm based, it's a very different consumer reality than even just over here in the UK. Hugely different. So I think what it means as a function is probably that you'll see slightly different structures of the teams, both internally and externally. And when I say that, for instance, I think it's been generalist marketeers versus specialist marketeers a little bit. That's definitely bleeding into each other now. I call my team kind of generalist specialists, which sounds a little bit weird, but they can't just know social, they can't just know programmatic, that's not going to get far enough, but they need to have a generalist understanding of several channels. And I think that might also transcend ultimately to structures with agencies. So you might still have a global agency, but you might need to revisit that model depending on who you are. Is it going to be hubbed? Is it going to be working with a local boutique agency to understand what's happening in local markets? So I think there's going to be quite a few changes, and what used to be kind of 3 different versions of structures that you would have with agencies and teams, that's probably now going to be augmented into something specific.
Yep. I guess thinking about the challenges and opportunities that you guys face, data and technology in its various guises, it's really hard to spot what is the right next thing and whether those things are going to work for you, whether they have worked, and kind of letting go of what hasn't worked and so on like that. So we've got generative AI on the horizon, if not with us now. The deprecation of third-party cookies and first-party cookies and new identifiers and so on like that. How are you guys kind of looking at identifying what are the winners and how to embrace them, Lisa?
Well, it's interesting. I think we've been on a journey over the last probably 5 years as advertisers, because I think, it was very tempting to buy more technology, whether it's, in order to access third-party data or different forms of measurement or different forms of optimization, different creative platforms. And it's no surprise that when PwC did the programmatic study and discovered, obviously, that there was a huge amount of money disappearing in, for example, the programmatic supply chain, it's because we'd been sold lots and lots of different tech layers, and every single bit's taking more and more out of the chain. So, it's really important, certainly for Vodafone, to be very, for the supply chain to be very transparent, and for us to be really careful in terms of what data we buy, what we need in order to get the best possible result without too much of our advertising money disappearing through that chain. And it is very much a careful balance.
Gayle, what's the next 3D printer? Like, what's the thing you're going to avoid or going to grab hold of?
Well, I mean, L'Oreal is an innovation company. So they have been driving beauty tech and developing tools to help people, whether it's people with disabilities, whether it's people, trying to access services and find out what's the right skincare for them. Lots of different services in development. And obviously AI, 3D, all comes into it. And at a global level, they have really strong development laboratories going for all of this and developing our own ChatGPTs, for example, because obviously there comes with ethical issues as soon as you go anywhere near AI and all the sort of the generative stuff. So I think L'Oreal as an innovation company will be at the forefront of it.
Yeah. Let's not go into copyright and IP infringement on AI and something like that.
Can I just add to the data point? So I think it's something that we've been talking a lot about. It's an exciting space, right? There's never been greater abundance of data or of tools to use. But I think for us, it's quite a simple lens through which we view all of this. I mean, for us, media is fuel for growth as well. And unless data or technology allows us to increase either the efficiency, effectiveness of what we're doing, proportionate to the investment, it's not something that's going to enhance our plans. So that's the sort of simple lens through which we try and pass all of those.
And I think you have to be clear about just identifying what use cases you can scale.
Exactly.
Like, be crisp and clear. It might just be a couple of things. It can be in the content side, it can be in the media, and then you really ramp up behind that.
I think for me that's a great filter, and like, does the new technology, does the data that you're accessing solve a genuine business problem? And that's kind of the way I look at things as well. Alex, with your experience based, with Tesco, and you're probably in a great position to comment on retail media, and it's obviously been discussed quite a bit, I think, this morning already. I mean, and now you kind of at Kraft, you must kind of have strong relationships with the retailers in that way. What's your take on like retail media? Strong to middling? In terms of like, you know, you're going to get behind it?
Well, I mean, disclaimer, I used to work in the retail media space when I was at Tesco.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a bias. But I think principally it's a really interesting space, right? I mean, anything which can enhance the consumer experience, which retail media should be able to do, because no one understands more about what consumers buy than retail. I think there's a lot of value it can add there. And it should, in theory, allow us to increase the effectiveness of our investment.
Yeah.
I think there are challenges with it, as there are with any emerging form of media. I think finding that right balance for us in terms of where it can genuinely increase our effectiveness and efficiency is a balance that we're trying to strike at the moment. But I also think as we're moving into this new space, we're obviously looking at, you know, how we work with Tesco, with Sainsbury's, with Asda, with, you know, with Morrison's, with Ocado. And it's very laborious working across all these different providers. I think some consistency in terms of how these guys measure, the methodology behind them, also to make it as easy for us as advertisers who are buying across these multiple sources. I think that's how I'd like to see the retail media space evolve.
Literally at this very second, there's another session with Barb and Justin, who's the CEO of Barb, kind of looking at the tyranny of choice and multiple standards that exist between kind of digital and TV. So how are you guys grappling, and particularly this has been called out with retail media and also CTV and TV and the comparison of kind of measurement. How are you guys looking at bridging the different standards of metrics that exist within media? It's a real head fuck. How are you dealing with it?
I think you need to start with what are the hygiene metrics that you can't let go of. Like, you know, was it delivered? Was there certain transparency around it? Like that's a hygiene that you have to decide yourself. Where you set that level. Is it going to be minimum IAB standards or something else? And, you know, everyone has different views on it. And then I think once you've established that, you just have to make as much as possible comparable sets between platforms or between different data sets, but I don't think that's particularly new. I agree with you. It's like with any new technologies, there's teething problems before you figure out how is that measured, how is it actually delivered, and then you just have to stay on top of it.
Yeah. Anybody else on?
Yeah, so I think
metrics?
certainly on the retail side, I agree, we've found it really difficult because you've got retailers that are at different levels of maturity.
Yeah.
And they're using different systems. It's quite opaque in terms of their charging models. So my plea would be to have them all on similar standards, similar systems, allow the transparency of the data, the fees, whatever it is that they're charging for, and the reporting, and allow advertisers to self-serve it as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I don't really want a managed service. I want to build it, whether it's in-house or at my agency. I want that skill set so we can choose how to optimise where to spend the money. So there's definitely a call for standardisation on retail media and transparency. The other one is about sort of TV and sort of the new norms of TV. And again, you know, we've been grappling this for quite some time, even just to get combined reach and frequency, for example. So obviously I'm a big champion of the Origin project. And so I'm really desperate for that to come so that we have one read on reach and frequency across all my AV channels. You know, and I would plea again, I don't have transparency even of my BVOD data. So I think there's lots to do, and certainly in terms of standardising that measurement, I think would go a really long way.
Okay, and I think we'll keep going on measurement and effectiveness in a second, but whilst we're kind of talking about TV, CTV, the bridge between the two, and I guess I want to go back to like your point around consumer and audience experience. Like, what do you have a message to the industry around the quality of TV experience that exists, and you know the issues that are around that right now? Feels quite up and down in terms of like that experience that exists for consumers. Any thoughts on that?
So in terms of connected TV, so we've got quite a broad definition of it. And from my experience, we've been running connected TV for quite some years, so it's not new news. I think what is new are some of the other platforms that are opening up that have come from a programmatic background, and they're bringing with it quite a lot of the problems from programmatic. And so that would be my call out again is, you know, sort of don't go down that road, you know, where you've got potential ad fraud, where you've got transparency issues. So at the moment, we don't necessarily touch the long tail. So we're sticking very much with BVOD, with YouTube on big screens, with Disney as it launches, Amazon as they launch, Freevee. So very much around sort of the content that we know and that we can verify. I'm not necessarily convinced yet on the longer tail, and equally what it's bringing in terms of reach versus just additional frequency.
And if I just add to that a slightly different or an old perspective is that I think what we all need to keep front of mind as we move into these new channels is that the consumer experience needs to remain front and centre.
Yeah.
If we get to a plane, as is the case with the long tail sometimes, that you're just spamming frequency. I mean, the consumers are going to have a bad experience. They're going to get annoyed at us as the advertisers, so everyone's losing.
Yeah.
So I think as this space evolves, making sure the consumer experience is front and centre of that evolution, I think will be really important.
Yeah, maintaining the value exchange with audiences who have, which is changing over time, right? As new audiences come into kind of experience in media and advertising. My kid, who's 10 years old, as you kind of know, like anecdotally, like kids just hate advertising. And we've got to really kind of address that going forwards, I think, the ad experience.
I'd say also, what you need as an advertiser depends a little bit on your business. So Vodafone's an example of a brand that has an incredibly broad audience with mass appeal, and we rarely need to find niche audiences. So for us, TV is there to probably to advertise our brand in the highest quality environment with the highest impact. So that's the role of TV. And TV, as in traditional broadcaster TV, is high quality content, low ad frequency, so it's high quality, high impact. What we don't need to then add supplementary sort of niche CTV players to our plan, because if we're going for smaller audiences, we have other platforms that do that really effectively. Now, if we were a brand that had a very specific niche audience, or potentially not even the budget to be able to afford linear TV, we might have a different need. So it's very hard to sit here and say this is what you should and shouldn't do, because it depends a bit on your brand and your business and your budgets, I'd say.
Okay. So we touched on metrics a little bit earlier, and the perennial issue of accountability of media investment, particularly speaking the language of business and the boardroom, the language of finance effectively. So I'm assuming the answer is going to be yes. Is the issue of validating and making media spend accountable in your business still prevalent now? Short term, I imagine really, really easy to do. Long term or mid to long term, how are you guys addressing that? And there's the rise, I guess, of the ascension of media mix modelling and econometrics again now, which is quite interesting. How are you guys embracing different forms of research, I guess?
I think that you first have to recognise there's not really a silver bullet of measurement. There's not one single metric, and I think that's an educational piece. There's a number of things that are influencing the advertising, not to mention the old distribution and shelf, etc. So you have to, if you're an FMCG client, you need to educate what media and advertising and creativity can influence versus what it can't influence, and then set up generally a bit of a suite of specific KPIs that measure both the long term and the short term. So I think it's important to measure short term effects. Obviously, we looking at ROAS, ROI, etc. But you complement these ones with long term metrics that you do have to measure over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, etc. And explain to boards or excos or CEOs how those things correlate. And then be quite agile. As I said, now we're in a very particular macroeconomic situation, going out of COVID, going into lots of things that are happening around the world just this weekend. So the impact of advertising, the impact on brands, the impact that your investment is going to have is potentially going to move quite erratically, and then you have to be quite quick, I think, to understand that impact.
For you, Lisa, I mean, telco, an abundance of kind of like customer data. Is it an easier job selling in effectiveness at Vodafone?
I'd say yes and no. Obviously, we're a brand that people make a purchase decision on probably once every 4 years, not every other week. So for us, measuring brand consideration, which obviously gives us a forward view of intent, is as important a metric to actually seeing what people are doing, because MMM only really measures actual transactions. It's just that relationship between media and then the response to media and transactions. And obviously, that doesn't give us a full picture because we only have about 12 to 15 people in market at any one time. So probably our two biggest KPIs are, brand consideration and return on ad spend, and all the other data that you can imagine is in service of those two KPIs. And I think that's probably a really important thing to kind of think about. You have metrics that are in service of other metrics because they're giving you an indication of what is likely to happen or what is happening whilst you're waiting for your econometrics data to catch up. So we work with a portfolio of different signals and different data points, but when it comes to KPIs, there are only really two. And that is definitely return on ad spend and brand consideration. And obviously we measure return on ad spend econometrically. We need to, because obviously we're a D2C business, but our sales come digitally, they come through our call centre, and they come through our retail estate. And so there's no way of joining things up in any other way.
Yeah. Alex, you were nodding along there.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting space. I think, to the point you were making earlier about media being fuel for growth, I think if we want to convince a business that is genuinely the case, it's down to us as marketeers to demonstrate that we are delivering that growth.
Yeah.
So I think making sure we're doing so in a way that doesn't just make sense to us, but makes sense to the boardroom, I think is the challenge that we're navigating at the moment. I think a really important part of that journey for us has been operating on more or less an open book policy with our finance team. I think marketing and media is often seen as a black box that kind of sits separately. You give it some money, they do what they do, and maybe you sell more products.
As a cost rather than an investment,
exactly.
Right?
And I think shifting that mindset is what we're trying to do at the moment. So making sure that every investment that we put down, we're very clear as to what the return of that is. Some will work, some won't. That's part of the marketing journey.
Yeah.
And driving that collaboration with finance has been really key for us as part of the journey.
Yeah. And so having the rigour and discipline alongside the strategy and tactics that you take,
And the transparency, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Transparency in what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what those results are. There's nothing to hide.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of advantage in bringing finance and marketing teams kind of closer together in terms of understanding. Gayle, same for you?
Yeah, I mean, we've started a programme with our marketing teams and our finance teams of sort of industrial scale MMMs, so really giving them the tools to make data-driven decision making. And it's really changing the game. It really is. And I think the next part for me is how do I marry the short-term ROI? For example, on some of the social platforms, I might be getting really high ROIs, but you and I both know that it's a 1 second view. So what is that doing for your long-term brand equity? Yeah. So there's a balance to be had between short-term ROI and long-term brand equity, and what is the sort of the effect on the consumer. Yeah. So that's the balance that we need to strike. And obviously, certain audiences are very much interested in the short-term ROI, and there's always a nagging voice like, hold on a minute, let's not just shift all the money into performance, and so there's a balance to be struck.
Memories flooding back from client-side experience. That's really cool, guys. Thank you so much. Any questions from the floor? We've got 1 minute to go. I'm quite impressed with my timekeeping. Anybody want to talk about effectiveness, media channels, data?
Or anything.
Yes.
Or anything.
Yeah, favourite colour, star sign, that kind of stuff. We could really go for it.
Thank you. How would you say, what would you say your relationship is with your media agency, and what are the opportunities for your media agencies? Because you're obviously running successful in-house media operations. So is kind of like the future and the plan to just keep growing, or are there things that you see obviously that your media agency needs to be doing and should be doing going forward?
I'll take that one. I would say it's changing. And it has changed really since COVID. I think that lit a rocket. So I think it's really evolving. they're coming with us, they're very much in partnership, and I think there are some skill sets that we want to take in-house and develop, but equally we need them to develop certain skills as well. So I think agility is going to become a really big thing, understanding how they become leaders on retail, e-commerce, driving that side of things forwards, but then how do you bring it all together? You know, because what I don't want is a team of isolated teams. I need someone to be planning and bringing it all together. So that is the work that we're doing with our agency, very much in partnership, about how do we develop the team of the future almost.
I think if I can build on that one as well, it's more than ever, I think it's been true always, is just be super crystal clear what your expectation is, then you're going to have a strong relationship with your agency. If they're unclear on what you expect and what you want, then you're going to go down a path of probably having a lot of overlaps between internal decisions, external decisions, how the teams work together. And go back to the structural piece that I had, you do need specialisms and you do need generalisms and how you bring that together. But I think it's key that you are very transparent and honest about this is what we'll be doing in-house, this is what we're doing externally, and when you also review that to say, well, at this moment in time, we're reviewing this particular area.
I would say it's not easy for agencies because obviously they're operating different models across their client base. In the case of Vodafone, you know, we buy digital media in-house, but our agency is working with us by providing us with strategic planning, as well as obviously then the planning and buying of traditional media. But I would say that it's in some ways media agencies have lost, but they've also gained in those kind of relationships because we're leaning on the media agency more for creativity, for creative media planning, for bringing to us those really special media partner opportunities. So you know, we work with Carrot, and Dentsu Creative is also now a big part of the service offering that we enjoy. And you know, when we're winning media awards, you know, some of them are because my in-house team have done brilliant work from a digital or performance point of view, but a lot of them, when they're the big campaigns with really creative media solutions, they've all come from the media agency. So it's a different way of working, but hopefully it's still equally rewarding from a creative agency a media agency point of view.
I think the pursuit of like Media 3.0, whatever that is, wherever we're going with the media industry, is so dependent on collaboration and partnerships. Partnerships is the word I would always use to describe like the way clients should be working with agencies. And there was a really lovely quote from your marketing director, Maria, what's her surname?
Yeah, Koutsoudakas.
Exactly, Gesundheit. And about as a couple of years into in-housing at Vodafone UK, actually made the agency relationship stronger. So kind of there's a perverse irony there of kind of, you know, the way that skill sets can blend together and relationships can work better. I think we're done, right? Rescue me. Oh, yeah? Okay.